One of the things I learned from Dr. Coleman is that there always needs to be homework. So in our discipleship community, when we meet, there's always a homework component. That's what they're held accountable to, both during the week through the accountability texts and communications. That's what they're held accountable for each week when we meet. So part of the weekly meeting will be readdressing the homework, me asking them who did it, who completed it. It's an honor system. Obviously, the trust is that they won't lie, that they'll be honest, that they didn't read 6-7 days a week last week. They read 4. I'll say to them, why? And they'll just say, I just got busy, didn't get it done. Do you need a new plan? We talk about that all the time. Do you have a plan? Is it a good plan? Are you executing the plan? In every area of life, this is a fair set of questions. What is your plan? Is it a good plan? Are you executing your plan? If you don't have a good plan, if you don't have a plan, the odds are really, really strong that you're not going to accomplish whatever your goal is. If you have a plan, you got to make sure it's a good plan. Because if you have a plan that's a bad plan, that's a bad plan. So you want to make sure you have a good plan. Then you can have a good plan, but if you don't execute the plan, that's a problem also. It'd be a bad plan not to execute a good plan. So there's 3 things. So I say to them all the time, what's your plan to pray? What's your plan to read the Bible? What's your plan to memorize? If it's getting done, great. If there's a better plan you find, execute that plan. If you're not getting it done, I'll say to the guys, if they say, I'm having trouble memorizing Scripture, what's your plan? Do you feel good about your plan? I don't. Guys, what are some other plans you're using? So the other guys are sharing all the time in the group something that has worked for them that might work for another person, particularly regarding Bible memory. What's your plan to get up in the morning? We talk about that. That's kind of funny. If somebody is late or sleeps through his alarm regularly, because we meet in the early morning. And again, we meet in the early morning for a number of reasons. Number one, it's a good precedent set by Jesus. Mark 1:35, it says, very early in the morning while it was still dark, he got up, went to a solitary place where he prayed. And that's what he did. That's not a commandment, but it certainly is an example. And frankly, it's something that I've found has held true for myself. And I really know very, very, very few people who are mature and effective impactors in the kingdom. This is about men now. I can't speak for women. Who don't get up early and start their day at some level with some kind of spiritual component regularly, a la Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get your spiritual growth habit work done at some time other than the morning. But I've met very few people. I've never met, well, I shouldn't say that. I heard about a very famous, legitimate Christian leader who did his work late at night. Now, in his situation, it was somewhat unique because he was an evangelist who traveled a lot, and so he found himself wound up at night. And so after he finished ministering, which he regularly did on the road as a pastor or a speaker or a national evangelist, that he found at night was when he was still wound up and he would do his best work. And so I can't say I haven't heard of that before, because I have. It's just not normative. And obviously when you ask people if they try to read at night and memorize at night, if they've had a long day, if they got kids at all, if they got a job that's taxing, they fall asleep. Some people look at the principle of the first fruits. Take the first fruits of your day, tithe your time. And when you tithe your money, you tithe the first of it. You don't wait until you pay bills and then give. You give on the front end and then you pay your bills. That'd be a standard Orthodox position. In the same way, tithe your time. That means you don't wait for stuff to happen, you make it happen. People don't wait to disciple. They don't wait till they have time. They make time. Because you never have time. You never have time because it's what we put off until the end, because it's really not mandatory and tangible. It is mandatory in terms of commandments, and it is tangible because it impacts you, but it's not like a bill that you have to pay by a certain time. So if you wait till you have time, you'll never do stuff. You have to make time. You have to grab hold of things and put them in your schedule and build habits. If you don't, and you're haphazard, the chances decrease that you're going to be who you want to become. There'll be less integrity Integrity is integration. Who you say you are and who you are won't be integrated. They will be disintegrated. They will not be habits that are sustainable and reproducible. And so we meet in the early morning on purpose, partly because our group is large enough that you'd never find a way to get everybody together if the time was after the day starts, 8 a.m. or whatever you want to call that. And at night, people want to be home with their families. They already have night tasks and duties regularly, so to meet at night takes another night. Some people just can't do that. But not a lot of people have a lot of things going on at 5 a.m. And so the early morning both is an example of Jesus. It practically is a time that's easier to make with people meeting together because few people have stuff in the early morning. Now, if you're only meeting with another person or three, you can make time at more regular times. Could be a weekend, could be Sunday during the Sunday school hour when you're already in church. Some people do that. It could be at night. You can certainly do that if you want to. It might be noon if you work close to somebody. But the odds are that the early morning in general is going to be the best time. The third reason that the early morning is nice because it's costly. It's hard to get up early if you're not used to it, and it's hard to get up earlier if you already get up early. However, we want it to be costly on purpose because surrendering and dying to yourself and spiritually parenting is costlier than not. And so one of the ways that I can find whether a guy is committed is if he'll faithfully get up in the morning and meet regularly, weekly, together with brothers to rub with each other in order to be better impactors for the kingdom. And so that's why I've chosen early morning. Over time, I've found, because my groups tend to be larger than smaller, that's just the way I've decided to do it. And frankly, I've lived in areas for a block of time, and I have lots of relationships. So for me, it's been easier to have a larger family. But all you need is one. And if there's two of you, that's a discipleship family, and you have to start somewhere. Dawson Trotman talks about that a lot in Born to Reproduce. And so you come together at a set time that's agreeable, that's regular, to inspire, educate, practice, role play, hold each other accountable, etc. That would be how that works out in terms of when. And your when is going to be different than somebody else's when. There's no magic in a particular when. It's just what works for you and the people that you're with. I choose the early morning because experientially that's what's proved to be the best chance that everybody can get together. But some guys miss occasionally or regularly because of travel or because of early morning responsibilities, and they either have to find a different discipler or a different men's group, or I'll meet with them at a separate time. If I have a pool of 2 discipleship groups, that's happened occasionally. Generally, if they can't come in the morning, I find them somebody else who disciples biblically that they can meet with, because they don't need to meet with me. They just need to meet with somebody who can walk with them as they walk with God. So once again, we talk about having a plan, making sure it's a good plan, execute the plan. If you have no plan, then find somebody that's successful in whatever you want to be successful in and adopt their plan, and then morph it yourself as you find what your rhythm is different than their rhythm is. So it's always, if you don't know how to memorize Scripture and you don't do it regularly, find somebody who does, see what they're doing and approximate it. Find out what other people are doing, whatever the issue is. If it's prayer, if it's long praying, what's your plan to long praying? Do you walk? Do you sit down? Do you kneel? What's your posture? Find out what the different options are in prayer so you can find what works for you. For me, if I'm with a group, I can stay engaged the whole time. But if I'm by myself and I'm kneeling somewhere, then I'm going to get distracted, odds are, and I'm going to daydream a little bit. Might even feel tired, just coincidentally. I have my phone off and away from me, because if it's there, I'm going to check it, or I'm going to get a notification, or I'm going to get a buzz. And so for me, it's a bad plan to have my phone on when I'm praying by myself. When people are there, it's simple. It's going to be off because I don't want an interruption. But you have to, through time and through experience and learning from your mentors or your discipler, you end up learning the options of which you begin to practice. Just get going. Get going. And find a plan, start your own plan, develop a plan, learn somebody else's plan, have a plan, make sure it works. That would be a good plan. and make sure you execute the good plan, because if you do have a good plan and you don't execute it, that's a bad plan also. So we say, have a plan, make sure it's a good plan, execute the plan, and that's our goal in all things. That's how we go about our business. Homework, as I said, is always going to be part of the fabric. We revisit it. Dr. Coleman said if we don't have homework, then they don't get a chance to prove their faithfulness and develop it. Develop their faithfulness, develop their habits. So we have homework always assigned. The homework is always regarding at least the Big Ten, so it might be, for sure it is. They're going to pray at some point. They're going to tacos pray 1 minute each of the letters, or they're going to teach somebody else tacos. That's their homework assignment. Or they're going to pray for a block of time straight, because people don't pray in blocks. They pray haphazardly and randomly and when they feel like it. So we, with our group right now, of a number of people from young believers to mature believers, we ask them to pray 10 minutes in a block of time every day. We hold them accountable to that. If they're not accomplishing that, we try to find out why. Obviously, 10 minutes, they got 10 minutes in their day. The matter is, are they going to make time? And do they have a habit of doing it, or do they need a better plan so they get it done? The bottom line is that want it done. How they get it done, when they get it done, is up to their own personality and rhythm. But that they get it done is the critical piece. So we're always going to pray. We're always going to Bible read. They're going to have homework on that. There's always going to be Bible memory. There's going to be homework on that. The Bible song will be occasionally. They'll have to sing it to somebody. They'll have to teach it to somebody. That will be part of the traditional homework with that. The 5 questions is something that's regularly part of the fabric soon. Not generally the first month, but by the second month, we're addressing some or all those questions every week. They got homework. They're going to regarding it, making sure that they're doing it. They bring it in. We evaluate it. They're held accountable to it. Testimony is something that they learn early. They practice. They give their testimony in the group. Homework is they give it to somebody else, or they write out their testimony, or they form it into bullet points. There's all kinds of ways, but in general, it has to do with they do themselves. They do in our group. They do outside the group with people they don't know. They do outside the group with people they know. We just keep revisiting it over and over, internally in the group, externally outside the group, so that when they're spontaneously called upon, they end up having a better chance for success at it. True with all the Big Ten. I try to find homework that's enough that it costs time, but not so much that within the rest of their life they can't do it. If a guy just says, I just have a hard time coming to the group because I'm having a hard time getting the homework done, I'll determine whether their life is chaotic, they just had a new baby, they changed jobs, and I'll say, listen, I just want you in the group. If you read and pray for sure, but if you're not able to role play stuff outside and you're not able to do this stuff, and if you feel like I know you're a good man, I know that you're practicing your habits, make sure you read and make sure you pray, but the other things I'm going to leave it for you. What I don't want is a guy not to come because he's stressed in life and he's not going to show up because he doesn't feel he can do the homework. What I don't want is for a guy not to come because he occasionally has travel in business or pleasure, whatever the case might be. Or if they occasionally have to work early and can't make the meeting. I want them to be there if they want to be there. If they don't want to be there, obviously we're not going to enter into a mutually agreed upon regular meeting time. But if they want to be there, I want them there. And I want them to grow. And I want them to do the homework, to be held accountable to grow. And if they want the same thing, it'll work. But if they don't, it won't. And so on the front end, I make sure as I communicate with them, this is who we are. This is how we go about process. This is what it's going to cost. Here's the results. Are you interested in that? And not everybody is. And if they aren't, that's fine. Dr. Coleman will say, some guys just don't want to meet in the morning. Some don't want to meet with me. And he says, that's okay. I'm not the answer for everybody. I'm quirky. I do things a certain way. I like things a certain way as a leader. And if they don't feel that, then that's okay. I encourage them to meet with somebody. I encourage them to be discipled or at least mentored. I encourage them to disciple somebody else. But whether they do that with me or through me, that's something that they can decide. And that's how he approaches it. I've learned that that is true also. His meetings are different than my meetings, just like my literal sons do things different than I do. My sons are a little bit like my wife, a little bit like me, and a little bit like neither of us. And my disciples are a little bit like me. They're a little bit like other disciplers or mentors they've had in their life, and a little bit like none of them because God gave them his own specific particular vision. And we have to learn to not hold on too tight to our disciples, give them tools, make sure they develop them, make sure they have a plan to make progress in the habits, and then they go on their way. And they parent then however they wish. Hopefully they draw some stuff from us that they found was beneficial and impactful and productive, and they embrace it, and it becomes them, and they absorb it, and they reproduce it, and it multiplies. But what it looks like may be entirely different. Dr. Coleman's meetings were, he rallied them at, I can't remember if it was 5:30 or 5:45 or 6. They met for an hour and a half. They had some fellowship time. They broke a little bit to have a snack, a little 5-minute meet and greet where they hugged each other, and he had donuts or cookies. I don't have food at my stuff. We don't do food in my discipleship community, but in Dr. Coleman he does. And they used to read little small 30-page booklet biographies, and somebody would teach it each week. We don't do that. He would do a devotional all the time and taught. I don't have that as part of my deal. So there are things that my spiritual father did that I do, and there's things that I don't do. And the bottom line is just like parenting our children. You got to do what you got to do. Have a conviction, right? Be humble about it. Give it your best shot. Learn from others. Practice, refine, keep at it, keep fighting to be great. These are all parts of the fabric of what we want to instill and provide in our discipleship community.